Welcome everybody to the Genus Brewing live stream. This is a live stream we do every single Sunday at 8:45, which stands for Pacific Standard Time, in the morning, a.m. in Spokane. If you are tuning in on the podcast, welcome as well. If you are on the podcast and ever want to see us live and be able to do the Q&A at the end, then go ahead and watch us on a Sunday on YouTube. The format here is we go through some Genus Brewing news, then we break down a style of the week, BJCP style guidelines, talk about our favorite malts, hops, and yeasts to use within that, and then we go into two discussion topics. Today we're talking about why IBUs mean nothing to have nothing to do with hoppiness. Nailed it.
There we are. Also, Reverend, I am going to be jealous. Hierophant is stupid delicious. Send us some.
Yeah. I mean, Hierophant started here, so
yeah,
we sort of win.
That's right. We gave you that awesomeness.
I feel like I need to be a little closer here.
Maybe a little bit.
You need me? You're good?
I
You're
don't
good?
know. Well, you
How are we
tested
sounding,
me.
How are we sounding, guys?
I should have switched seats.
See if that's uncomfortable for you.
Well,
I got my arm around it now, and then it's looking good, right?
But you sound tested it while it was far away, so now it might be loud.
Well, I was trying to get it in a certain range, and I peaked out at the range that I wanted to, but not quite. Wasn't consistently getting up there. When you were talking quieter, it was good. Lisa said, "Sounds fine. Move on. Fine, wife. Jeez, I'm just trying to make sure it's good." Everyone loves us.
We want to make sure everybody can hear us crystal clear and listen to the soothing sound of our voice.
That's right. And if we need to get really close for some ASMR style, then we can do that too.
We definitely can.
Let's go into some Genus Brewing news.
All right. New seltzer on tap. We did a little bit something different with this seltzer. This actually came from our seltzer experiment. Go watch that video because it's awesome. We're using a little bit more herby and savory things at this time. It is strawberry lavender, which I find amazing. I love lavender things when they're done right, and this is just perfect.
If they're not done right, they taste like a bar of soap, or like pretty much any hotel you've ever been to, how that smells when they overly clean it. But these ones done right, and it tastes really good. We also have been running out of IPAs. Lots of people have been brewing them, or drinking them.
Yeah, that's been kind of crazy. We just ran through our Terrapin series of IPAs. Those were a huge hit on there. We almost have a Grapefruit Ipa on tap. We're doing that. That's part of our Shell 77 series that we do with some of the Air Force guys here out at Fairchild. That one should be pretty darn good. I almost don't want to add grapefruit to it because there's so much good grapefruitiness already, but
Just from the hops,
Yeah, that's what they requested. That's what we're going to give them, and it's going to be delicious.
Coming soon, and I'll let you guess on the spelling of that.
And we are talking about the beer, not just Peter. Yeah.
I decided to do a joke of the day. Let me know what you guys think, if this is a great idea and we should include it in every single live stream, or if it's a terrible idea and this should be my last time I ever do it. So, an infinite number of mathematicians walk into a bar. I can tell you guys are already liking this. It's pretty good, right?
Definitely.
The first one orders a beer. The second one orders a half a beer. The third one orders a quarter of a beer. The bartender stops them, pours 2 beers. Tells them, "I think you guys should know your limits."
But
Great. Everyone loves that?
I mean, that was...
Is that sticking around?
All right. Fine. I got a joke for you. I got a better joke. All right. So,
I don't know about better. I don't think that's possible.
Look, a guy, a priest, and a rabbit walk into a bar.
A rabbit?
And the bartender asks them what they want. The rabbit turns at him, looks at him, and says, "I don't know. I think I'm just here because of autocorrect."
I get it now.
Yeah, because, rabbit.
All right, so
fine.
Everyone's saying joke of the day is a great idea. Seems like we're on it.
Definitely.
Now it's time for our Beer of the Week. Bum, bum, bum. Beer of the Week. Yeah! And today's beer of the week is a Kolsch. Kolsch, I knew it in BJCP style guidelines, the 2008 guidelines, because those are the ones that I memorized. It used to be category 6C, I believe. And now it is category something that's
5B.
5B.
Yeah.
Change the number and the letter.
Do you have that pulled up? I have a little bit of stats. Kolsch, coming up on summertime. This is honest, well, at least for us here, this is a great time to start brewing a Kolsch. They're super, super delicious beers, and for everybody who wants to do, a nice, clean, crisp lager, but can't, this is a great beer to substitute it. There are sometimes I would rather have a Kolsch than, Helles or most of the time American Pilsners. I won't include like Czech because those are delicious.
Czech's a unique style of beer, though. Czech's like the IPA of the lager world.
Like when you get a proper made one, it's so good.
Sazziness. But Kolsch by itself is a really well-balanced beer because it has a little bit of, I would say, earthiness, a little bit of like, not earthiness, meatiness, a little bit of substance on top of just not just being a really, really light beer. And so it's something that you can, grab onto your palate, but it is still light enough that you can drink it on a hot summer day. Can be corny, doesn't have to do. Traditionally, Kolsch was done with wheat, not corn. But basically anything, it's an adjunct optional beer, so you can go up to 20% any adjunct if you want that extra fluffiness from the wheat or corniness from the corn or whatever you're looking for. Or rice works too.
Actually, I like flaked rice in some of mine to dry it out a little bit more. That goes into actually... some of the stats, the final gravity, I like mine to be a little bit lower. They can be on the sweeter end, or not sweeter end, but a little bit higher, finish out at about 1.011. The range is 1.007 to 1.011. I like them a little bit drier. I think that is great for the Kolsch style. Because you're getting that extra little bit of fruitiness, you don't get the perceived dryness out of it, but the beer is so crushable when it's down below that 1.010.
And that's what that's what you're going for.
Yeah. All right, so talking about that, let's get into stats. Quick stat breakdown, what that kind of means for you. IBU range is pretty wide on this one, and I think that's kind of depending on what type of hops you're using along with it and kind of what you're achieving with, you're wanting to achieve with those hops. It's from 18 to 30 on the scale. And again, if you're using a little bit more aggressive hops, you can bump that up a little. Well, sorry. If you're using a little bit more aggressive hops, obviously you're going to have a little bit more IBU on there. Maybe finish out a little bit sweeter so you still maintain the good balance in this beer. Or throwing noble hops onto it. You got that 18. They're all on the back end. You dry this out so it's just that crisp, clean beer.
Personally, what we usually like to do is kind of follow right in the middle ground, so we're not using a super high alpha hop. I'd save that for beers that I lean sweeter, like blondes. I'll usually go like, 0.5 ounces of Magnum is all you need in a 5-gallon batch. But usually in the Kolsch, we like to kind of go play that middle ground with some noble hop derivatives. One of them is going to come up in our hop in the week, but other than the one that we're about to mention, there's also hops like Sterling and Mount Hood. You can go Willamette if you want a little bit of that sweeter earthierness. So there's a lot of great options in that middle ground that aren't going to be 2 to 3 alpha acids. They're going to be that, let's say 6 to 8 alpha acids, so you don't have to use as much of them, but can still get some of that classic. I like the lemony flavors, those lemony grassy flavors.
I think it just makes the Kolsch a little bit crisper on there, and I will agree with that. Going on the original gravity, that's going to be 1.044 to 1.050. Like we said on the final gravity, you're looking at 1.007 to 1.011. Kind of an ABV range from 4.5 to just under 5.5. 5.5 might be a little bit too high for these beers. They are supposed to be supremely crushable and very sessionable. So you should be drinking a lot. Well, they're intended to be drinking a lot in one
You should be
setting.
Drinking several. I'm talking 8 to 20, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So that's actually true. I'll get to that comment later. That distracted me.
I've been distracted by the comments. Lazy ass reefers trying to trigger me, and I appreciate it. I really do.
Yeah, he does. It's fun. So, these beers are meant to drink a lot of them in one session. I mean, it's meant to be drank in the summer where you're really crushing it. The Kolsch glass in particular is just this nice tall cylinder that just sits right on the. That's a little bit too big. Yeah, that's better. And it literally is designed so it shoots it towards the back of your throat and you can drink it quicker. It's a super refreshing beer. Don't go too heavy on these. They don't need to be heavy.
Yeah. And that kind of brings us into our malt of the week and why I chose our malt of the week. Like we've been talking about a lot with recipe development, which we went over, that was last week, right? One of these weeks. It's best to keep these recipes as simple as possible, and by that I mean as close to a 1 malt or 2 malt beer as possible. We've gone over a lot of the base malts already that I would use if I did this as a 1 malt beer, which is totally fine. We're talking the Halcyons and the Halcyons. For those of you guys who haven't tried to use Halcyon, that's also a good one. But if you wanted to go a 2-malt beer using a lighter like a Pilsner malt or my favorite Pilsner malt, Heidelberg, and you wanted to get some color, some depth of character, some of the Maillard melanoidins going on, and satisfy the potential adjunct that you can have, I chose dark wheat. Specifically dark wheat from Best Malts is my favorite, and that is a 6 level bond Munich type wheat malt.
Yeah. So that is also one thing. Kolsch's should have a little bit of color to them. So it is appropriate to add something like this. You get a little bit more body out of it. And dark wheat is awesome. You get some really, really good fruity flavors coming out of this like you would from Munich, but you don't get the extra malty biscuitiness that you would out of Munich.
Yeah.
Plus, being a wheat, it adds that nice little fluffiness just to the bottom of it. And I do like a fluffy bottom.
Everybody likes a fluffy bottom. Let's go into the hops, but also I'm going to answer Jimmy's question.
Yeah.
Thoughts on using the new German hops like Hümelmelon, Mandarina Bavaria, or Hallertau Blanc. I think it's good, but that said, being a more yeast-driven beer, specifically with the yeast that I chose this time, because those are so low total oil hops, sometimes the nice flavors that they have can get lost. That said, if you can make those flavors shine by using them in a later edition, like using everything 10 minutes and later, and still getting that IBU to where you want it, then I think they'd be really good. They'd be really tasty. I usually use those kinds in like blondes though.
No, in all honesty, I like using those types of hops in something like this really light beer. Like Peter said, it's a very fine balance with hops like that to achieve the flavor that you want from them, but still have the nice light delicateness of the beer. So yeah, go ahead and use them. Just make sure you're using it appropriately. I think it would be delicious. In all honesty, having the Mandarina Bavaria in there, I think would be really nice because you get that nice little spiciness from it and that tiny little bit of a mandarin bite at the end.
Yeah, I love the fact that it gets that little bit of extra citrus note to it, and it still is reminiscent of a classic sauce with a little bit of that lemony grassiness.
Yeah.
Well, let's go into the hop of the week. The hop of the week I chose is one of those kind of hybrids. It's a derivative of a noble hop, and that's called Cluster. Cluster has a lot of those Saaz characters. It's got that classic Saaz kind of lemoniness, that little bit of earth, a little bit of black pepper, that grassiness, that flavor that you like that I can only describe as Saaz. If you've never had a good noble Saaz beer with a lot of Saaz in it, you don't really know what I'm talking about. But you should make a beer like that just so that you know what Saaz flavor is, because I use that to describe a lot of other beers. And Cluster is one of those hops that it's not pure Saaz, but it has a lot of that Saaz character into it, but it's also comes in around 7.5 alpha acid, so you can rely on only using maybe 2 or less ounces in a 5-gallon batch.
Tawan, we are drinking Micheladas.
Micheladas.
So, yeah, and that's nice. I mean, Cluster, I think Cluster kind of gets overlooked a lot because it was an old school high alpha acid hop that a lot of people moved away from. This is a really, really nice hop. I enjoy it. Using it in several different applications, even beyond the Kolsch.
What were you going to that?
Yeah.
Got distracted.
Got a little distracted by both getting a message. Sorry. I think what was our last
using Cluster beyond Kolsch. There's a lot of things you can use Cluster in.
We used it in our last West Coast IPA, and it was absolutely beautiful because it gave you those really good spicy notes as far as a bittering addition goes. You can get a little over aggressive with that, so don't do it too much. But
it's a really good bridge, and it's the same kind of thing as Mount Hood. I see a lot of like really big brewers use Mount Hood in their giant hop blends because Mount Hood just kind of gives you that middle bridge when you've got way too much, of that fruity sweetness from a lot of New World hops. Just having a little bit of something like Cluster or Mount Hood in there to kind of be like, oh yeah, this is beer, helps a lot.
Reverend, we haven't got to the Yeast yet, and I love Mount Hood for that. That's one of my favorite hops. It's so nice and versatile. That would be a perfect hop in a Kolsch too.
Yeah, it definitely that definitely works kind of in the same world. Let's get on to that yeast though. Yeah. This yeast is a more difficult yeast to use in making a proper Kolsch, but it's my favorite yeast to use in making a proper Kolsch, and that is the German ale strain, i.e. Kaiser and Imperial, i.e. think it's also called German Ale and White Labs. It's been a while since I've had White Labs.
Yeah.
But that is, so 1007 in Yeast or Kaiser in Imperial. And that the German Ale strain is a fun one because at warmer temperatures, i.e. 68 and above, 68 to 72, it does have that classic German fruitiness. We're not really going for that in this specific beer, but fermented colder in that 65 to 66 degree temperature range, it still pushes malt forward without being fruity.
Not to say that the fruitiness would be entirely inappropriate in a Kolsch. You would just be pushing more into a German ale instead of just a classic German ale than a Kolsch in that sense.
Yeah, so instead of that hybrid style like you want from the Kolsch, where they're supposed to be super neutral and lager-esque, but brewed like an ale. So this kind of still pushes forward that malt character. The hard part about German ale is it's super powdery. It's a cropping strain, and it's very, very difficult to flock out.
But that's where this long lagering period comes in. And I say long, but comparatively, this lagering period comes in, and this is something that makes Kolsch really crispy in taste. You need to add some lagering to it, and that means storing cold, not lager yeast.
Yeah.
So
what we like to do, because we don't want to take up tank space, is we'll actually get this through relatively fast, maybe 14 days in primary, and then maybe another 10 days in bright secondary. It's bright, not secondary, but just to kind of clear up and carbonate, and then we'll get it into kegs, and then we'll store ours in kegs for a long time before even tapping them. And they really hit that peak right around that 3-month time. The more they're stored cold, the more all the flavors kind of meld together. We definitely notice that because we do a coffee Kolsch year round. Nice Kolsch base with coffee, and that 3-month time period is really where it hits its stride.
It is wonderful. That's also a great trick for all you homebrewers out there. If you don't have the capability to actually ferment cold, you can still make wonderful, wonderful lagers by actually just lagering them. That's one of the most important parts of lagers, is that cold storage. Just get it into your packaging and let it sit for a while in condition, and you can find that you can make some really, really good lager beers without actually having temperature control on that.
Aaron Barsamian.
Yeah.
Pressure or no pressure, I would not pressure ferment Kolsch. If possible, I would entirely open ferment Kolsch, actually. But I definitely wouldn't pressure ferment.
Because of the yeast and what it's going to do on here, it's going to put in some off flavors that you don't want. You're going to catch some more sulfur coming out of it. You'll actually catch a little bit. It's a mustiness. We call it fartiness sometimes. You don't want those extra aromatics in there. There's no benefit from pressure fermenting Kolsch at this. In fact, like Peter said, to get some of the best Kolsches out there, you should open ferment. That's kind of what this yeast was meant to do.
Yeah. All right, so that's our favorite malt, hops, and yeast for a Kolsch. Just one more quick note is when you're doing a Kolsch, I do like them on the softer water profile side. So that's very, very low minerality. Pretty much everything should be below 50 parts per million. Most things should be below 15 parts per million. The only thing that you might bump a little bit, just for that extra mouthfeel and malt perceived flavor, is a little bit of both sodium and chloride. So I might keep those chlorides up at 25 to 30, and the sodium maybe 20 to 25 parts per million.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a couple questions about coffee in there. Somebody asked a question about dosing coffee into a Kolsch or a light beer. 1 ounce per 5 gallons is pretty darn good if you're going to dry bean it. Do not leave it on the beans in the beer for more than 24 hours. We normally go for 12 hours on that, but longer than 24, you're actually going to start pulling some real vegetal flavors, and it will taste a little bit like green peppers, like green bell peppers.
As long as you got good contact, you'll get great coffee flavor in a very short amount of time. And yeah, it's just a really quick dry bean right before bottling or kegging. So.
Yeah. Reverend, finding agents in this. Actually, if you want to push this through, we should start off with that. If you want to push this through, Kolsch's through a little bit faster, any lagers that you actually just want to kind of cold store for a while, a little bit faster, finding agents are pretty darn awesome to use in there. We tend to use a combination, a 2-part of Keelsilsol and Chitosan, basically a negative ion and then a positive ion that falls through. You can use whatever you like on there, and that makes sure that you don't have too much sedimentation. And
You've got your own.
fine. That makes sure that we don't have too much sedimentation in kegs or in bottles after you've done it. That's a great way to go about it, too.
From those of you wondering where the new Glarus spotted cow came from, Ryan's best friend actually came by, and just because he loves how his interactions with Ryan and how much Ryan does for the brewery, he decided to bring us some spotted cow. You'll probably see him you've seen him in a couple of our Genus Not Brewing episodes. His name's Damon, but yeah, we met him because he's Ryan's best friend.
We also like to call him 3-inch Ryan.
Jumping on to topic number 1, the topic that we titled this whole thing up, and that is why IBUs don't tell the whole story. Why IBUs do not mean hoppy beer.
Yes, this is a thing. This is a thing, actually. Kind of got inspired by it last night. I was at a local place called the Filling Station, and overhearing a gentleman explain IBUs to the people he was with. And what he was saying makes public common sense, but it actually was just so far wrong. It hurt. It physically hurt. And, it's not even his fault. We perpetuate these kinds of things as brewers.
You hear it all the time.
Like, literally, what's the IBU in this beer? If you come to our place and you ask for the highest IBU beer, you are going to be served a stout, as you should, because stouts need all of that bitterness to counteract the sweetness.
Most
barley wine.
Most big stouts that are made, they're made at anywhere between 80 and 120 IBUs. Whereas especially nowadays with a lot of hazy IPAs, you got hazy IPAs coming in at 30 to 35 IBUs.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things that when it became really popular to make big hoppy IPAs, IBUs mattered a little bit more.
Because that was the pissing contest.
Well, and everybody made IPAs the same way with the same hops, with the same malts and the same recipes. So that was a thing that we measured by because we're all doing it the same. And we have figured out better ways to do it now. And it's one of those things for personally, especially in people in the shop, I try to get people to think about the wording that they're using instead. Like how bitter is something, how much perceived bitterness is in it, or how much hoppiness is in it. I always ask, what does hoppiness mean to you? Are you looking for that big bitter bite, or are you looking for some citrusiness? Or are people out there looking for coconutiness, which is hoppiness? Coconut flavors is hoppiness. That comes from hop.
Or if you're looking for that flavor that's, just like you rang out a rag that was sopped up with pog juice, pineapple, orange, guava. That can all be hoppiness too.
100%. So let's get into this now.
So first, let's talk about ways to perceive bitterness. So there is IBUs, and IBUs will give you some bitterness and give you some balance to beer. And so a lot of people will actually confuse a high IBU beer with a beer that is high in other forms of bitterness.
Yeah. So, and this is a really, really good thing. Perceived bitterness, I'm going to take a second to talk about that. Perceived bitterness is different than actual bitterness. IBU is an international bittering unit. How much alpha acids turn into isoalpha acids, and how much literal bitterness in water it is. This is something that I always use to explain this. A black cup of coffee is super bitter. You put cream and sugar into it, it's no longer bitter, but it has the same IBU level, the same bitterness level. This is perceived bitterness. How much can you actually taste in the beer? Not how much there is, but how much the bitterness you can actually taste.
I mean, coffee won't have any IBUs in it.
No, that's the why there were air quotes.
But that goes to the different ways that bitterness is there. So the different things that can give bitterness besides IBUs, you also have just acidity of any sort. Any sort of acidity is also going to either give you bitterness by itself, or it's going to increase the perception of bitterness in something like IBUs that's already there.
Yeah, I think that kind of comes to a point. If you actually start to get into sour IPAs, it does pull different molecules, or not molecules, but it does pull different flavors out of there. If you go true sour, bitterness can kind of be perceived as almost like orange or grapefruit peel, that pith that's in there, that kind of bitterness. As well, it makes you experience the hops more, so you're really diving into that. I'm not explaining it well right now. Sorry, the acidity really helps you perceive hops generally in an IPA, having a little bit of acid.
What we'll do is we'll even add some lactic acid or use acid malt to near its flavor threshold just to increase